welcome back to another episode of the ADH Dads. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
How you doing this week, brother? How's screen-free summer treating you?
Oh man, well, you know what's funny about that? I know that we talked about screen-free summer, and then there's always there's a time where they're useful and time for connection and stuff. Well, I'm going through a course of medicine that is pretty strong, and so I have limitations this next week. So you know what definitely is going to be part of our week is more screen time, because that's something that I can rest through. So twist of fate in that one for us here. But my hope is that I can find things to do with my kiddo that still don't involve screens that I'm still capable of doing in the next week. But yeah, that's how my screen-free summertime's going. How about yourself?
Man, isn't that always the thing? As soon as you make a decision like this, life is like, you know what? Here's an injury for you. Here's a sickness. But yeah, it's going good here. We also had a few screen days here, some family movie nights here, watching the Despicable Me and Minion movies, preparing for the newest one, which we'll probably check out in theaters. I've only taken the girls to the theaters one time, and they seem to really enjoy that, and all the candy and popcorn and carbs that come along with that. So I would like to do that again this summer before they go back to school. We're trying to decide on Inside Out or Despicable Me right now. So, but screen-free summer's going good, man. We just got a trampoline for the backyard, so
Oh,
nice potential for some bone breaking and some injuries, hot sun.
yeah, there'll probably be a few times of shed tears and kids running into mom or dad saying, "Oh yeah, this happened," and "Oh, they're not playing with me." Who knows? The trampolines are amazing because they're a quick way to find out how kids can interact with each other when they're physically probably incapable of controlling themselves and bouncing each other around. They got to find out some interesting conflict resolution while being bumped into each other. So I'll be curious to see. You might want to take some videos, see if you can go viral, something else again.
Yeah, I've never known a trampoline owner that hasn't walked away with at least one kid breaking an arm or a leg. So we'll see how this goes.
Do we need to take bets on who it's going to be?
My money would be on Naomi. She's not as afflicted by pain as the other two. Aubrey will come in with the littlest speck of blood on her and needing a Band-Aid and love and care. Naomi will come in with a scraped knee, blood dripping down her leg, and she'll go, "Huh, I didn't even realize I did that."
Well, it's a good start for you then, huh?
Yeah, I just been trying to keep the volume of the voice down, yelling. I wanted to talk to you, strategize today about, I know we've done a few episodes on this, but I think it's always useful and important to revisit this kind of stuff and see where we're at and seeing what methods we're utilizing in today's parenting journey. So how's life been treating you in the realm of tonality of voice and volume?
Yeah, this is actually pretty relevant to my situation, so I'm glad that we can talk about it, because I took what some people would say was drastic measures with it. I was dropping kiddo off at camp one morning, and I don't know if we had kind of a challenging evening the previous, but I just simply asked him. I said, "Hey, bud, what's something I can do to be a better dad for you?" And he said, "No yelling." And I was like, "Oh, that's a tough one." Okay, and then the interesting thing about all that is there's further development with that story. He went with his mom, and then I got him back, and that first day he got back, he was honestly at times, I don't know how else to describe it, kind of mean, and so he was being very oppositional with his words, and just kind of really testing my patience. And then I got loud. I yelled, and you know what that meant? It meant I lost control of myself and wanted to find a way to feel in control by lying to myself that the yelling is going to work. But that's the truth of it. I yelled, and then that night he goes to bed, and I texted his mom, and I said, I don't know what was going on. Cohen was unsafe with the dogs, and and he was oppositional with me, and it was really a hard night. And then she texted me and she said, yeah, that sounds really difficult, which, one thing that we talk about a lot of time is validation and affirmation. And she did a very good job of that. And she said, after that, after acknowledging that, she said that Cohen has expressed some anxiety around, some of the things going on at my place, which first off, that's concerning, because he had to voice it to his mom, because at some point along the way, I probably was not giving him the space to say that to me directly. So, she mentioned a couple of things, and it kind of really hit me, like, yeah, I probably have a kid who's exhibiting some defiance and unsafe choices, because he himself isn't feeling entirely safe in this environment. And not to say, I'm a crazy rage head or anything like that. I would say quite contrary to that, actually. But still, we all slip up. And I said to myself, all right, I actually put this in the text back to his mom. I said, tomorrow morning I'm going to promise to Cohen that I won't yell anymore. I won't yell at him anymore. And it doesn't mean, if he's making him, an unsafe choice, that I won't raise my voice to get his attention to try and get something to stop. Or, he's 8, so I wouldn't think, this would happen. But, we say the idea of, like, if our kids are starting to run toward the street, maybe yell to get their attention. But yeah, that next morning I decided to tell him, I promise I won't yell. And the thing about that is, and I know we'll have, a lot to go around in the conversation here about yelling, but the thing about that is it's a commitment. It's a serious commitment. A promise is, something that people hold in high regard. And if you don't live up to that promise, they'll probably think different of you. So that has given me, in any moment since, when I feel, some form of escalation in my thoughts and maybe my patience, leaning toward impatience, I have a natural pause. I remind myself that it's in there now. It's programmed into my brain. All you promise not to yell, you got to start thinking of other ways to work through this situation. So I don't need anybody else to be there for me. I just have that accountability measurement. And I think some people think that that's nuts, but honestly, like, I'm trying to do what's best for myself and my son. And I imagine if I have that moment of pause, I'm going to try and strategize more. So that's actually really relevant to our conversation today. And that's what I've actually put into practice and promise to keep.
Yeah, I did that 28-day yell challenge a couple months ago around the holidays, and the most useful thing that I've pulled out of that was the day one thing, and that's to start tallying yells throughout the day. Write everybody's name on a list and just keep tracking of that. I mean, and you see such a difference between the day before you start doing that and the day you start doing that, and how much the yelling stops, because we're aware of it, we're conscious of it, we're expecting it, we're preemptively preparing for it. And I think, like, just that step can be so wildly useful than being swept up in a moment in overwhelm. Like, the most useful moments to me are, I'll tell you a story. Kids room mess, a few weeks back. I'm going in there right before bedtime. They were supposed to be in there the last 4 hours cleaning, but every time I go to check on them, a bigger mess has formed, spawned out of nowhere in a different section of the room, and the other messes are still, so it's getting bigger, not smaller. So my anxiety and my patience is also getting bigger and bigger, and I'm going in there stomping around right before bedtime. Look, this is here and this is here. And look, you forgot to pick this up. And what is this doing over here? This wasn't here the last time I came in, and all the things. And we had a triple bunk bed in the kids' room, and we just deconstructed it recently and made Aubrey's a single bed and Caden's and Naomi's the bunk bed. So, reorganize a room, and I go to sit on Aubrey's bed, and it's those little wood slats that go in, they're like little 1x2s, and they go in, not like horizontally, but vertically. And I went and sat on those, and they just split, right? And my butt sank through like quicksand in the bed. And before you knew it, I was in like the fetal position. My toes and my fingers were touching, and I was wrapped up in a ball, and my legs and arms were sticking straight out of the bed. But I was in this ball and couldn't fidget my way out of it. And everybody started laughing at me, including myself. 1 minute, 1 second, I was just this rage monster stomping around, pointing everything out that they were doing wrong. And the next minute, I'm stuck in this cannonball position, trying to wiggle myself out of the bed. And it was just one of those moments like, what a silly man. What a silly, silly, silly man. And those are the moments that really kind of like rock me back to reality, and how stupid I look and how none of this is working or effective and should have been handled a different way. So those are really humbling moments. I wish I could always catch those before they happen, but I often think even without the sinking into the bed aspect of it, it's just silly, right? Like, it's just
Mm.
silly to get that worked up over the socks or the things that the kids are just unable to put into their awareness at this stage.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting you said the word silly too, because that actually ties into my trauma from childhood till today. And maybe this will help you, but like you gave yourself a little bit of harsh criticism just now, and then you backed it up by saying silly things you do. I had to retrain myself a little bit. I somewhere along the journey of my life, I went from being pretty good at holding things and walking down hallways and stuff. But in more recent years, I don't know, maybe it's the glasses prescription. I'm not sure, but when I turn the corner in my building here, sometimes I hit the wall, and then I'll drop stuff just at random. Like I'm just I'm handling it and I'm paying attention to this thing, but then it just managed to drop it. And I remember for a time I'd be like, that was so stupid. Like that would be the language in my head as I would tell myself, I'm stupid. Now I go to, oh yeah, I'm just kind of silly. I do those silly things. It's kind of a quirk that I've got. I'm a little on the klutzy side sometimes. So I believe that the way we hear feedback and the way it's delivered to us can have an effect on ourselves. Like you were saying, you sank into the bed, and of course, no doubt you tell the story a year from now, you're just going to laugh about it. But in the moment, sometimes we get really critical, and we kind of hurt ourselves with our words. And a lot of that is formed from being told we were no good, or being yelled at, and then we believe the words in the yelling were "you're no good." So part of that language of changing that is to like you said, like make it humorous. Say that a silly thing. I did a silly thing. Now, granted, kids cleaning the room. That sometimes after 4 hours, how do you make that silly? How do you accept that? That's a challenge. So what do you do? What do you do going forward? Do you have a thought, a plan? Like what is the situation looking like so you feel it's a success all around and you didn't get to the point of yelling in order to get it to actually be accomplished?
Yeah, I think it's just about being consistent with positive affirmations and rewards. Because it's a real slippery slope when you start pointing out the negative stuff and the stuff that isn't getting done, to where everybody's dysregulated and no one feels good, like you're saying, and everybody's just on high defense mode because they're trying to defend their actions. Um, where I think the positive affirmations go a lot further and a lot longer, but they take a lot more energy from us as parents. And sometimes that can feel like a surrender in itself. Like I've talked to a lot of parents that are like, well, it's an expectation, not a reward. You're supposed to be this kind of clean person and not expect to get rewarded for it. You just should be. But I think that every good habit starts with an addiction to the reward, or an addiction to the consequence. So, and I think that discovering a why and the importance of it is still us as adults struggle with this and need to remember this, and that's why it's so hard to maybe get through certain tasks, or why we get so angry, because we haven't really defined the why behind the task, and we think that we're just blatantly doing it, where like that's a habit that we still are, getting comfortable with teaching ourselves in our adult life. So I don't think it's too far off to think that our kids really need that repetition, of reward and constant reminder that you're doing this because you want this, or that there's this on the other side of that, or we'll all feel this way. You have to find some sort of motivation, and lately it's been, whoever cleans the room up, will get something that we all will talk about beforehand, and usually that'll resonate real well with our oldest, Naomi, where our middle thinks it's maybe a joke until her sister's sitting there with the toy, and she doesn't have anything to show for the effort because she sat around for 3 hours while Naomi did all the cleaning. Is the kind of method that we're going with now. I don't know if creating the sibling rivalry is a good method or not. I told you I read that book, Siblings Without Rivalry, a few months back, and I was struggling with this concept of, they say, don't say, you're bad because you didn't clean. You positively reinforce the one sibling, instead, and goes, wow, that was such a good job that you cleaned. That made me so happy, instead of, you're so bad that you didn't clean. And I was kind of noticing this more of a sibling rivalry in that sense, because it almost felt like we were comparing them, But when you set up a task like this, whoever does it will get this, or, whoever gets done first or whatever, or whoever does the most, I think that brings them in to that and really helps motivate them and keep focused and off of each other, that, the other one's getting attention. It's, well, I can do this if I can get this if I do this. And that seems to be kind of positively impacting our situations right now. Pockets feel a little bit lighter because of the rewards that we're getting, but we are, I feel, creating good habits with, motivation and the responsibilities that need to be taken care of before we reap the benefits of those responsibilities.
Yeah, I just pictured it. Naomi gets everything cleaned, and she gets a toy as a reward, and then it's time for dinner. She just tosses the toy into the middle of the floor of the room, and then comes downstairs. Like, add to the possible messes. But yeah, that's great. And I think it's a hard thing to balance too. With I have had outside opinions suggest that my creating a reward system is not, it's not actually creating good habits and stuff. And why should a kid get a reward for good behavior? They should just be good. But I think there's so much more to it than that. It's instilling some form of responsibility in our kids early on. And also too, with the idea of, you seeing and recognizing that cleaning and saying, thank you, this is wonderful, however you might word it, that's rewarding too. So the way I look at it, maybe the analogy is this: kids will look at yelling as going to a batting cage and the balls are just flying right at their bodies. Or when you give that positive reinforcement and you make them feel seen and heard and safe, then they feel like you're playing catch with them and you're connecting. So the yelling part really is just creating damage, even though, we still haven't mastered the ability to avoid it sometimes. And then the reward system, dare I suggest, is a great opportunity. Like, it started with the words first, acknowledgement and of a good, good job. I think that's really a powerful part of avoiding yelling and actually finding some real good connection and not necessarily just giving them something that they can hold, but giving them words to encourage and support and be thankful and grateful for. Because honestly, like, I know the episode's about yelling, and what's the one thing that we talked about before? I think about my son who's ADHD. So there's that rejection sensitive dysphoria that we talk about. So all right, for listeners who might not know, it's like it's when you experience like really like severe emotional pain because of a failure, or feeling of failure or being rejected. So if we try to yell them into doing the right thing, they're just going to feel like lesser people, and they'll probably feel scared or unsafe in the situation with us. So I know rejection sensitive dysphoria doesn't have to have a diagnosis of ADHD or autism, but I've experienced that in my life a number of times where it didn't feel like I could ever be good enough. And that became, the language in my head for so many years that I even battled with it, in little moments where I would start to think, oh, if only this, if only I didn't do this, if I wasn't so stupid in this way. And so I started to reject myself because I got a lot of feedback like that when I was growing up, and that was painful. So, yeah, I really want to honor you in the idea of, creating a system not just about, physical rewards, but also emotional reward and connection. I think that's what really helps our kiddos.
I'll tell you a story. This last week, we came back from our vacation, and Naomi was very helpful. And my wife and I pulled her into our room and said, "Naomi, we're so proud of you. You've been doing so good this week, so helpful with all these things." Aubrey wasn't even there to hear it. So there was none of this sibling rivalry or without rivalry as we're talking. But it was just, we pulled Naomi in and said, like, "We're so proud of you. You've been doing so good. Thank you. You're being so helpful." And that ignited a fire in her. The next week, she every day woke up before us to make us breakfast in bed, and she was cooking dinner and lunches, packing lunches for the siblings, younger siblings, and she was really, really getting into it. And it felt great at first, but then it started getting a little. It felt like it was more effort on us as adults to keep her. "No, Naomi, make sure you put that away when you're done with it," because you'd come down and breakfast would be ready, but there'd be a mess everywhere. Or I was getting mayonnaise, tomato, and Nutella sandwiches for lunch. And I was, because that's what they thought a fluffer nutter was.
hitting
Which,
all the groups that don't align with each other on that one.
yeah, and then they're just waiting at the door, waiting for you to eat it so they can get that verbal affirmation about how good they are. And you try to get through it the first day. "Oh boy, okay, I'll eat this later. Wow, good job." I could tell a little sarcasm's there, but then the next morning I went out and they made breakfast, and every drawer and cabinet was open. I don't know why they were looking under the sink for whatever food related, but every single cabinet and drawer was open. It looked like that scene in The Sixth Sense where she turns around and everything is open, and all the cups and dishes are out everywhere. And Naomi's powder sugaring French toast sticks, so powder sugar is getting all over the clean dishes, everywhere, and it was just like, oh my God, and I dropped the ball as a parent, man. All I could see was the mess. I couldn't see the effort, and I just was like, "What did you do? Oh my God, look at this. Look at this. You guys didn't, oh, yeah. you know, and they made my coffee, but it was like super, it had like 5 cups of sugar in it. And I was like, it's so sweet. I couldn't get through, and it's like my morning routine is my meditation. That's where I'm like, I sit there in silence and go, okay, you fucking asshole, you get it right today. Don't yell at them, get your head on straight, breathe. This is what you're going to do when you're confronted with this. And I prep myself, and I just walked into it this day with powdered sugar and everything a mess. And I dropped the ball. I just dropped the ball. All I could see was the mess. And my wife was trying to give me the silent looks from across the room, like, oh, stop it, say something nice, but I just couldn't. I was just like so out of my element with this mess that was going on. And my wife went and dropped the kids off to school, and she came back and she was like, you kind of owe the kids an apology. They worked so hard and they were so hurt that all you could see was the mess. And I felt terribly, JJ, all day long. I just was thinking about how I was going to apologize to them and make it up to them, but because it's those moments that you wish you could have back, because all that fire that got lit under her ass, totally extinguished, man, you know? And all that effort that she was putting into like getting that verbal affirmation and those positive gratuity from all of this stuff is now just like gone with that one comment. And all that work that we've been doing building her up in the week was just erased with one weak moment like that, and how hard it can hit you, so we've talked about before, we've read somewhere that for every every mistake that you've brought into your relationship or as a parent, it takes 7 good deeds to wipe away the stain of that one mistake that you made, because our bodies and minds and hearts remember the pain from the one thing versus the good of the 7, so just got to keep that in mind as a parent too, that how slippery the slope is on the downward and how hard it is to build the momentum going up again.
Yeah, and when we're escalated and when we respond the way we do, it's kind of like a mixed message. The goal on our end is probably likely to get them to understand what we're experiencing, what we're seeing, but the message gets lost in the yelling and the anger. So instead of them thinking, oh, yeah, dad, probably would like it cleaned up in here, they're like, they're just like, you're no good, you did terrible, and the message doesn't resonate with them of what you're really trying to say. Like, what you probably wanted to say is something like, okay, cool, now we need to make sure we clean this up. Awesome, I love the breakfast, but yeah, we got to make sure we clean this up so we can prepare for the next meal. And that message is kind of lost when we're yelling at our kids about how we wanted something to be or how we want them to behave. So yeah, I mean, then you think about the idea of them maybe noticing it in a way like what you mentioned you grew up with everything needed to be cleaned and stuff, and if it wasn't, it was pointed out, and so therefore you're getting this story in your head, like, hi, like I said earlier, I can't do anything right, and they're so mad at me, and it feels hard to then want to motivate ourselves, as children or as adults, to then turn around and do the thing that the person wants us to do, because we're not receiving positive constructive feedback at that point. We're receiving the message that we do things wrong, we can't get things figured out. Whereas, of course, you had a nice breakfast, thoughtful breakfast and stuff, and it's valuable that you had somebody else to provide feedback to you later on to say, hey, I think you should give the kids an apology, because then you do the thing that we talk about a lot here too, is the repair work, because we're incapable of being perfect humans, and we let ourselves slip a little bit too much into our emotions to then bring out not the ideal behavior that our kids will take and try and process about themselves. So the repair work, like you said, yeah, you've got to do all those extra things now to make up for the yelling incident, or just maybe you were just a little bit delivering message. Maybe it's not always yelling in a way that the kids receive it differently than you put it out there. Now you've got to put in that time and effort to show them that you really do see the good, and you really are grateful for whatever it is that they were really trying to achieve in the moment. So yeah, it's hard. And then I think too, raising that feedback to a loud volume gets a whole bunch more challenging to repair, but it's not impossible. But it creates a stressful environment. Yelling creates the fight or flight response. So if we're yelling, then it's hard to focus on what's being said, because the kids are probably more scared than they are reticent to whatever feedback we're trying to give them. So yeah, the more we can provide this feedback in a positive, kind way to them, and it can be hard, but the suggestion of putting in the work to clean up the mess, and making it positive will impact them in the best way. So I hear you, and I'm not saying like, yeah, you made a mistake, you screwed up, that's what you do, but instead, my acknowledgement is that it was called out, you paid attention to it, you wanted to do the repair work, and the kids are benefiting post the disaster kitchen.
Yeah, I want to speak to that too because my dad was a lot like a lot of dads of our generation, where I didn't get a lot of apologies. Uh, I don't know if I can genuinely recall a time where my dad apologized right now. I'm sure maybe there's one in there if I really sat down the piece of paper and pencil that I can, but that a time doesn't come up in my mind shows a lot, I think, of that generation, that mindset, which is, maybe if I don't talk about it, it'll go away. I fucked up, but I fucked up in that moment, but we just will move on. And then it's like it never happened. And, I would like to encourage a lot of men and fathers out there that like quite on of the contrary, that when we do go to do the repair work on this, that's where I think these teachable moments are and the really great opportunities for connection and to resonate with them long term of who you are. I remember during this apology, I had at one point said, I didn't get a lot of apologies from my dad when he would yell. And I'm sorry that I yell, but one thing that I really want to be good about with you guys is apologizing and taking accountability for it, because I'm not perfect. And there are things that I'm working on, and things that, happened when I was a kid that sometimes I don't realize I'm doing. And I said, my biggest fear is honestly that you guys are going to grow up and you're going to want nothing to do with me because I was such a jerk. And Naomi said, that's never going to happen, Coley. It's not like your dad, because you always apologize and you always talk to us about what happened. So you'll never be like your dad or his parents with him. And I found that to be really reassuring from a 9-year-old,
that's some really beautiful emotional intelligence being shared with you.
Exactly. And it was just this epiphany moment for me of that this is where the real gold lies. We are not going to be perfect. And even if I think you were the perfect father and gave your kid everything and showed up to every single disagreement, in a perfect way, they may not be equipped to handle the real shit then. You know what I mean? Because they don't know where the limits are and where to backtrack and what boundaries look like and how to respect them and how to demand respect in yourself in those moments and have value and confidence in yourself. And I'm not saying like go intentionally yell at your kids and give them hardships to get over, but I think that when these do come up and we are able to humble ourselves down to the level of our kids and say, still something I'm working on. And that's why it's important that we start talking about it now with you. So, you don't end up as a confused 37-year-old trying to figure it out. Then, you at least have some of the tool belts that I'm trying to work with here. So I would just like to, like I say, encourage a lot of men out there that when we do get into these disagreements, or when we do mess up with the tonality or the volume or the saying of the right things, that we really can create a beautiful opportunity to forge a new kind of memory. Just like the movie of Inside Out, a memory can be both sad and happy. And sometimes that is the reality of life. It's not, we don't just get a joy core memory. Sometimes there's an angry moment that lasted in there that led to a sad moment, that led to someone showing up for you and really forged a connection or a beautiful moment of joy. So I think that like all of the emotions in a moment need to be celebrated, even if we don't want to pay attention to them or give them any sort of power. I think that it is important to give them power so that we can understand them better, which is powerful in turn.
Yeah, I mean that's I don't know if this is the official term for it, but you were talking about learned behavior there. You didn't get that from your dad when you were younger, and that meant you probably felt unsafe, and you didn't feel seen, of course, because he didn't follow up. So I mean, kids who are constantly yelled at, they may grow up to yell themselves, and it becomes their model for dealing with frustration, dealing with these difficult thoughts. And if we don't follow up, like you were saying, the learned behavior does not get that other satisfaction of connection and repair. So instead, we yell and we leave it at that, and we don't return to it and don't acknowledge our part in it. Basically, what we're saying is, whoever can make the loudest damage emotionally, especially the last word, wins. And that's the type of learned behavior that you and I are talking about that we want to avoid. So you already got a really good amount of feedback from her saying, you're not like that and you always apologize. Like, that's something that she's as she continues to grow through adolescence and stuff, I'm sure if that continues to be the model for her, that's a learned behavior she's going to have. And honestly, dare I suggest, she didn't have to apologize in response, but she was creating repair work with you as well by acknowledging that. And so yes, I know there's a certain generation where it's like double down, double down your thoughts, double down your emotions, and here's all the reasons why I had every right to yell. Well, what about all the reasons why you shouldn't yell, or why you should repair? Because you love this person, because you care about them, because you want them to not repeat those same mistakes. And that's the thing. So often we have people get in their heads that I need to be right in the situation, and then they try to find all the reasons to back up why. And what that does is that just keeps them in their upset mode. That doesn't change to that other side. So we see how that learned behavior can be so detrimental to our young ones, because we got some of that.
Yeah, and I think when we're dealing with neurodivergence too, that dysmorphia that you're talking about really can come out in these moments of reprimand. And, I think we really need to, it's kind of a dichotomy, right? Because we're trying to control anger and not to express anger. But we also, I think, need to have a forgiveness of anger, and not take it too personally, because it is a natural emotion that comes up in us, and that was deep in there before we developed the prefrontal cortex to ask the question, why am I angry? Before it was just be angry, be scared, be big, and then it was like we started getting smarter, and then you start dissecting, like, well, what is anger? What is fear? And there's just question after question, and you never get closer to an answer. So like, I think we really need to have some forgiveness with it, when we come to dissecting it, especially with neurodivergency, because I can tell you it's a very fine line for me, anger, in between passion and anger, right? Like, I feel a lot of times in my life it's been misinterpreted in me, where I'm going in a semi honest joke, about this does bug me, but I'm going to try to be light about it to like kind of brush it off. Maybe some people call that passive aggression. I like to call it humor. It gets me out of a lot of situations, JJ. It diffuses a lot of anger problems in me. Okay. But not always. Sometimes there's like this little crosswire glitch that goes on in my brain, where all of a sudden I've taken it from joke into anger, and I don't even realize I've crossed that threshold until everybody's looking at me like, yo, why are you being such a dick? Why are you yelling so much about not getting ice cream because the place was closed? And sometimes that, I'm getting, I think, better with the awareness and the behavioral techniques that I try to practice and be conscious of. But, especially as a kid and not understanding that about myself, and getting into these social situations where it was like, man, I thought we were all having a good time laughing. Now everybody thinks I'm an asshole and is looking at me like they don't want to be me hanging around anymore, and that took a lot of understanding of myself. And sometimes I still drop the ball on that, So like I said, I think that we have to be willing to talk about it in an accepting, non-judgmental way, especially with neurodivergence, especially if you have neurodivergence, you need, which can't always be fair to our partners, right? That maybe don't understand that, but I think it's something to be conscious of and aware of. And, implemented when we're trying to communicate about why and what we felt this anger over.
So much good stuff in there. And one thing that I really want to highlight, you talked about neurodiversity and your own neurodiversity, and the messages being delivered sometimes aren't received in the same way we deliver them. I can tell you that there are times where I want to insert humor into the equation, into the conversation, or into the conflict, and Cohen's not there. He's like, he was almost upset that I'm trying to make a joke, and he'll say stop, and he'll almost double down on his discomfort because he has this, I don't know, he has a sensitivity to him. We all have a sensitivity to us. Back to that idea of the dysphoria. That's part of emotional regulation challenges that a lot of people with ADHD have. They can't necessarily manage their emotions in a way, or they might not pick up on the certain subtle cues, whether that be sarcasm or something similar. They still are stuck in that emotional dysregulation. So the idea of bringing humor could be perfectly welcomed and open to to the conversation, to the situation with somebody who's neurotypical. But a neurodiverse person, sometimes we really have to take our time to see where they're truly at. And it's hard, because they're still sometimes not even sure what they're feeling except for one emotion. So reading that and listening to them first, sometimes for me, if I'm going to insert humor into the equation, I almost need to make sure somehow get permission to move into that space of taking it to somewhere silly, because I have a kid he's not there. He can't just be pushed into that direction. So I love that you said that, because I'm the same way, and it just made me go, oh, how many times have I done that? And Cohen's like, stop, because he's not there. He's not there at all. I'm like, I'll win the situation, and he's like, no, you won't. We're gonna stay back in this space.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that is completely lost on our neurodivergent child. Point in case, we were in Hawaii doing a 10-hour trip, touring, hiking, volcanoes, waterfalls, bakeries, everything on the island, that you can imagine. And Naomi was, being her normal, beautiful expression of neurodivergency in the van. And the driver didn't know that she had neurodivergency, but could kind of maybe pick up on the energy between the adults and the frustration of getting her to adhere to certain rules that were going on in the van, And so the driver started kind of noticing the ODD expressing itself, that oppositional defiance, and he wasn't necessarily shaming her, but he was making jokes. We take the bad kids and we use them as a human sacrifice to the volcano. That did not resonate, let me tell you. The little girl was terrified. She thought we were really going to throw her off of the top of this volcano if she did not behave. And she was in tears, crying silently in the back of this van, and it was just one of those moments that went over her head and had the complete opposite. She just felt this immense sense of guilt and shame and embarrassment, and it just sucked the joy out of her. So I can feel you there on sometimes the humor doesn't necessarily resonate in those moments where we have a neurodivergent kid worked up to his threshold and you're trying to defuse it with humor, which can oftentimes feel like a cut down.
But I have a question. Did the driver do some repair work? Sounds like he might have needed to do that.
Nope, he didn't. He just did that generational thing where he'd ignored it and went on the rest of the van ride and didn't say anything. So
I wonder how that went for him. Actually, you told us already. Oh, man. Wow. Well, goodness. So I guess I want to speak a little bit more to neurodiversity and yelling them, because I think we're getting somewhere really good here, is not just understanding our children, but also, putting in that work to show them that we are listening and we care. And then, of course, having the effort to have follow-up, which might have not been something that we were necessarily taught. We can teach ourselves, which is so beautiful. But, simple things. I don't know. Think about neurodiverse kids are generally sensitive to sensory, experience. So if we overload them with noise and loud with our with our yelling, that's only adding to the chaos, and it makes it even harder for them to focus on what you're saying, and or just the situation at hand, because now they're just probably in fight flight mode, protect, try and cower away. Cohen's done that before. He's cowered because he's gotten scared because the noise was too loud. So that's one that I really wanted to point out for our poor kiddos who, my son, he'll wear headphones when we go to the movies because it's just too much noise for him otherwise. And so what do I do if I turn around, he's having an upset moment, and then if I raise my voice, well, we already know how sensitive he is. So he's basically probably in some form or another saying, I'm not safe right now. I don't have anything to protect me. I don't feel safe. So there's just another instance of why yelling especially doesn't work for our neurodiverse kids. I think most kids who have autism or ADHD have trouble with sensory. And it's interesting because they can be really loud. They can be the loudest person in the room, but that's projecting their voice out. That's not trying to take in all the extra overload. So it doesn't always seem fair, but we can find that path if we choose to help them, see how you can get through a conflict without making that escalation. And I think one thing just starts with the awareness that they're going to hear it in a different way than what other people might hear it. So back to the idea of sensitivity to criticism, they can be just more sensitive. I can tell you right now, Cohen's always more sensitive. Yelling feels personal and hurtful to him. So he's not just simply seeing it as, dad's arguing. He's probably, seeing it as, a little bit of attack on who the kid, who kiddo is. And that could be lost again in the yelling, the message you might be trying to get through, which usually the message is I'm angry and I can't control myself, but still, there's that part of it that I think ADHD kids, the way they have to filter things out in the world, it sometimes just goes down to I'm getting hurt here, and that's as far as I'm going to take this message. Fascinating thing too with the yelling, let's think about the flip side of that. I said loud noises. Well, what are ADHD people sometimes brilliant at? Hyper focus. So they might be tuning out yelling because it's a familiar or overwhelming sound to them, and so therefore the message isn't even being delivered. We might be getting really loud and thinking I need to raise my voice because you are not hearing me, but they might be tuning it out because that's how they know how to cope, or that's how they get away from something that's hard, because their hyper focus is telling them this is your safest place here. So those are kind of some of my thoughts on kiddos who have to try and deal with a yell as opposed to a conversation to get the message across to them what we're seeing and we're feeling.
Yeah, and I noticed that too in the moments of loud and yell where I don't even finish a sentence and they are already off on another tangent. Well, can I have a snack? And I'm not even done through my rant of why it upsets me to have to step on a Lego, or, whatever my reason is. They've just, like you said, totally tuned out, whether it be because they're uncomfortable or whether it be because it's so rhythmic and familiar that, that they can do that. But the times that I ask, you want a hug? You want to talk about it while I hug you? And we can sit on the staircase and I just hold her, and that is where we really get compromise, communication, and where we both feel like, wow, I was heard and I got what I wanted, and I feel like I explained myself and the other person respected that, and that can be difficult to wind down and realize that in the moment, and it can also feel like a little bit of like a sacrifice of power too as an adult. I think that we really get wrapped up in our heads about the story of I'm an adult and they're a kid and they need to do what I say, and oftentimes I'll find myself just like in that mindset because I don't want to explain why I want the thing done or why I'm saying no, and we get into that because I said so, or, kind of mentality, which I think is a really dropping of the ball. Because we just think that we're losing power as an adult, as an independent person, as a parent. And I just would really love to challenge us to is it really that important though? Is it really that important? Because that was literally, I think, one of the most important things that I heard from a therapist, that we were talking about when it comes to this stuff, if she doesn't use a fork for dinner, she loses it. Like she has to eat with the fork. And the therapist just kind of let this long pause go before saying, but does she?
Yeah.
But does she really need a fork? How big of a deal is this? Would you rather sit at a restaurant and have people look at you because your kid's eating with their hands, or would you rather be in a restaurant trying to make your way out because everybody's looking at you because you're screaming at your kid to use a fork? Like, what
Hmm.
feels better for you?
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
Right. Is it worth it? And yelling is usually that moment that most people can realize I'm no longer being rational. Like the only way to get this message across because I'm right is to yell. As soon as you start to yell, your rational image that you're trying to put out there becomes irrational. It does not look like this is somebody who really has the understanding of their argument and just needs to convince the other person. Now, no, it's I don't understand this well enough, and I just don't like it that you're not doing what I want you to do. So I'm yelling. No more is that message delivered as this is a benefit to you and to the people around you. Now it's just you're wrong and I'm angry and I can't quite understand what's going on here. So safest thing for me to do is try and force my situation onto yours. And therefore no longer do you have an argument. Now you just have tantrum. And that's the adult throwing the tantrum, and therefore the kid's not going to be like, oh yeah, he yelled back there. That's it. I get it now. I needed to do this because he yelled or she yelled. Moms yell too. So that's the big one. I love the idea of in the restaurant, people staring at you, and Cohen has had some really quirky behaviors, and sometimes I'm just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he's doing that right now. Like he was going outside. We were outside with I think the dogs one time, and there were quite a few people around us, and he just decided he wanted to be a dog, so he started going arr, arr, and he would scratch at his ear and stuff, and people probably were thinking he's just being a kid, just being a silly kid. He's calling attention to himself, and I'm thinking, oh man, can't he just act more like a person? But that was me. That was me trying to insert myself in his situation because I was uncomfortable. Just like the tantrum and I say tantrum for adults because I think we throw the biggest tantrums because we have a hard time trying to understand the situation. It's fascinating how we as adults still have immature ways about ourselves when it comes to conflict resolution. But the beautiful thing, just like modeling learned behavior and stuff, one way to be influenced is also to practice it. So when we practice those techniques, like like what you just said, just acknowledging where this kiddo might be at in their moment of upset, like that goes a long way. It means it's the simple message is I'm not crazy, I'm not stupid. This person's actually acknowledging me and cares, you know. And it doesn't mean that we're saying, whenever they're angry, whenever they're losing their cool and they're being irrational, that we should just say, oh yeah, I see what you're doing, makes sense. But is it wrong to do that ever? Is it ever a situation where somebody's actually in their true feelings and can't really control their thoughts and actions as well because they are in so much in their feeling and upset, to still just kind of acknowledge and say, I see what you're feeling, I understand this. There's never a point where that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. My young self in that kid who's feeling the fear and that they're not good enough when I'm yelling at my kid. That's what my young
Yep.
self is.
Yep. Good talk. And hopefully we can revisit this over the summer here, which I may need to do, because these talks are always great. And then I go a couple days and then I feel like I need to have another talk. So it's a constant work, it's constant effort, it's a constant journey.
Yeah.
And one that never ends, but just continues to grow and build upon itself. So I always appreciate your feedback, brother. Appreciate you and all the good things that you have to say. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this journey. And I will do my research and due diligence here and find that 7 steps to stop a meltdown. I know it's somewhere. But thanks for listening. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
This has been another episode of the ADH Dads. Till next time.